Let's get in these layoffs. Let's spend 10 minutes on this. Shawn Fain, I warned y'all. I warned y'all. I warned y'all. I warned y'all. I told you. I told you. I warned you. And I said, listen, you are seriously going to shoot yourself in the foot. When it's holding UAW and we seen Biden go over there to try to get the UAW's endorsement and stuff, Shawn Fain is now running around and saying, oh my God, Stellantis is a problem over there. He released a recent Facebook advertisement because he knows that he's probably going to be speaking at the Democratic National Convention. And so Shawn Fain, the president of UAW, who I believe is in bed with the Harrison Biden administration, ran around and he was celebrated amongst all of the people. And instead of him working with the companies and ensuring that both, the negotiated thing is tied in with the performance of the company, similar to how CEO pay is doing, and they get incentives and then they get raises and stuff like that. Instead of him working with the company, what you're starting to see is layoffs on a mass scale. I'm in Detroit. I know people. I'm related to people whose plants are going down to one shift and they are basically creating permanent layoffs and they running amok. And as JD Vance say, and as a lot of these politicians say, and they're absolutely right, when you start to see layoffs in Michigan, everybody should be concerned.
Remember, this is the woman who voted to preserve NAFTA, to extend NAFTA, the very trade deal that sent American auto jobs to Mexico by the tens of thousands and turned American dreams into nightmares.
Let me stop there for a second so I can educate people on NAFTA, because a lot of people are not familiar with NAFTA. When you see our country's jobs, when our jobs were leaving, and a lot of y'all may be too young or you wasn't a part of the workforce, or maybe you were super young and you wasn't familiar because you never did the history lesson. Here in Michigan, the history was right in front of our face because most of our grandfathers or our fathers and things like that, my father in particular was brought up here by his father, and his father's name was Aurelius. And Aurelius was from Dawson, Georgia. And so the majority of my family was from the South, down in the South. And Aurelius came up to Michigan because this is where all of the auto jobs are. So my grandfather, who has now passed away, came up here, got an auto job, and then sent for my father and his uncle and his wife, right? And then they came up here and they joined him, and times were great, right? So they all came up here to get auto jobs, which eventually led to him being able to fund his construction company and stuff like that, and so on and so forth, right? And so we moved to Detroit, or they moved to Detroit, and this was way before they had me. And if you know anything about the auto industry back then, it was booming. It was a pathway. Really, it was the foundation of America. The steel industry and the auto industry was the backbone of America. And so most of our uncles and our grandfathers and things like that, we knew somebody that worked in the auto industry. And it's not far-fetched that you had somebody in your family that can give you what we called A-plan papers. Now it's called employee pricing. They changed the name of it. But what's called A-plan papers, because if you work for the company, then you basically can give A-plan papers to a family member, which would allow for you to get a discount on how much you can finance a vehicle for, right? And so if you are familiar with that time, right, because my father, obviously, and his father before him, and even if you wasn't a part of Ford, Chrysler, or GM, the big three, you worked at an auto supplier. So you can be at a Lear, you could be at some other auto supplier that was then dependent on the auto industry for them to thrive. I worked in the steel industry. I worked at auto suppliers and I worked at the steel industry. I worked at what was Rouge Steel, which then turned into, I forgot what the name of it was. Severstal. It got bought out by a Russian company, but they still had parameters and having to keep jobs here in the United States of America. Then it turned into something else, TK, something else. I don't know. And if you go down to Gary, Indiana, in which I've toured Gary, Indiana, and I've looked at their steel mills and stuff like that, it's largely a ghost town. And it's been absolutely decimated by what happened during the Bush and the Clinton administration as far as them giving our jobs away. So I'm giving you a little mini history so you can understand where I'm coming from and why this is so passionate for me. And so the union then unionized way back then because they were advocating for safety and workers' rights and the ability to be able to negotiate, right? And so they were actually a good thing. It was good for the time because it was an industry that was largely unregulated. And so they was paying people what they wanted to, and they was firing people and all of this stuff. And so the union was created for the worker, and it was a good thing because it allowed for us, us middle classers, a path and comfort and wage growth and safety and fairness inside of it and all of this stuff, right? But the union largely became a nuisance because by the time that I got into it, in the early 2000s in the steel industry, it was a place that was basically protecting all of the ones that was the worst of the workers. If you was out there late all the time, they can negotiate. I seen chicks busting it down for their union reps for a real one. That's a fact. I don't want to name no names, but it largely became a thing that was in cahoots with the company, and it didn't benefit the worker. And a lot of times they just protected, and they spent the majority of their time helping people that should have been fired a long time ago. And so the union then became a nuisance. Then came 2008, and jobs just exponentially left. Even though it was already being pared down by technology, jobs just absolutely got decimated. Flint used to be one of the most thriving economies in the United States of America, and they absolutely got decimated. Detroit got decimated during the 2008 crisis. A lot of places just absolutely got destroyed. Gary, Indiana, a lot of places was just suffering, right? And so when we think about and we talk about negotiating the North American Free Trade Agreement, and the reason that I want to give you this information is that I want to empower you. I want to educate you. I want you to know what you're talking about when you go into these debates with people that don't know anything about what they're talking about. The Clinton administration, the Bush administrations, those administrations, mainly the Clinton administration, gave away American jobs for short-term prosperity. They sold your jobs away. They allowed for our manufacturers to basically take jobs over to China, to outsource our jobs over to Mexico, to give a lot of our jobs over to Canada. And so what was built was called the North American Free Trade Agreement. And so when they say that the majority of the cars are made here in the Americas, they're basically saying Mexico, United States, Canada. So they don't have to say it's being made in the United States of America. They saying that it's made in North America. It's made over here where all of this is connected. Canada, Mexico, all of that. And so what these companies then did was not only did they ship jobs over to India, to Taiwan, to China in order to manufacture a lot of this stuff. If you look at the price sheet and it shows you exactly what percentage of the parts are made here in the United States of America and how many is made is made overseas or in a different country. A lot of times they include Mexico and Canada in that. So it may be assembled here or it may be assembled over in Mexico and then it's shipped over here in the United States of America, but it still does not benefit American manufacturing and jobs. So when people then say, man, I love Clinton and all of this stuff, Clinton manufactured the housing crisis and Clinton ultimately manufactured giving away North American jobs. So when Trump then came into office, he wanted to stop the bleeding. And one of the things that he did was that he renegotiated the North American Free Trade Agreement instead of Kamala Harris and the Biden administration just extending it by default. And what foreign countries then started to do, including China, was that they would then start to ship in the majority of their cars into Mexico, assemble them in Mexico, and then say that they was made here, and then ship them in the United States of America, and then they would get past whatever it was that was negotiated as far as the North American Free Trade Agreement. Well, Trump sought to stop all that, and that's what he did. Not only did he institute the tariffs on China in order to set the foundation for American jobs, but he also renegotiated the North American Free Trade Agreement with Canada and Mexico in order to stop them from having a competitive advantage for Americans, which would then incentivize American auto manufacturers and manufacturers in general to make vehicles and to make stuff here back in America. So he set the foundation that Biden and Harris was supposed to run on, and they fumbled it. They fumbled it. And the UAW, instead of working along with the Trump administration, which he saved their jobs, decided that they wanted to partner with and sell out to the Biden administration just so that they can continue to do this identity politics thing and to stay remaining Democrat, knowing that the majority of their members was going to suffer as a result of it. So now when you see Stellantis and all of these other companies starting to lay off because they cannot control costs and they can't compete with other auto manufacturers, including BYD, who is going to be coming into the United States of America and buying up all of these companies, Now you can see why it's important for you to vote the way that you do, because you're not just doing it for your current circumstances. You're doing it for your children. You're doing it for your children. The United States of American auto manufacturers, including Ford, Chrysler, and GM, they even stopped making cars in the United States of America over the last 10 to 15 years. That's why they got rid of all of the cars. That's why you don't see no Ford Fusions. You don't see no Focuses being sold here. You don't see no Malibus. You don't see none of those cars being made here in the United States of America. They got rid of it. They got rid of the Chevy Cruze. They got rid of all of that stuff. And only the cars that are made here, either they're luxury cars, so where they can have a markup on them, or they're made in another completely different country and they shipped here in the United States of America. That's why Buick is largely made in China. It's a Chinese company now that is now shipping cars into the United States of America, and you're buying it because you're saying, well, it's an American company. No, it's a company that profits, but then ultimately the majority of the jobs is made over in China. Buick is largely a Chinese company. That is a fact. The majority of these cars and stuff is assembled and made for the Chinese market and adapted here for the United States of America. And so when JD Vance says, because he can't go into this large lesson, right? When JD Vance says they voted to extend the North American Free Trade Agreement, Trump went in and renegotiated it because he did it on the behalf of the United States auto manufacturers and the people that depend on those jobs and the people that are creating jobs in the United States of America. But because you're so ignorant, you will then say, well, Trump is racist. Trump is racist, instead of realizing that he's the one that's actually saving your job. He's not trying to control the manufacturing process. He's incentivizing manufacturers to create jobs and to create vehicles here, good paying American jobs, which ultimately spurs the American economy because you keep more money flowing within our own country. But people are ignorant. And so you listen to a Shawn Fain that gives you these talking points, or you listen to these people that's on TikTok and stuff that don't know nothing about economies and they don't know nothing about policy, they don't know anything about laws. They can't break down exactly what happened in past presidential cabinets and things like that of how they sold out your country. But then you lean on them in order to continue to give you the thing that's worse for you when you're voting against your own best interest. So when he put the tariffs in place that Biden and Harris continued to extend and they didn't get rid of the tariffs, they did that for a reason because they know that he had a good idea. And they would like to take advantage of the fact that he renegotiated the North American Free Trade Agreement. And so then they start to say, well, we created American jobs. No, Trump set the foundation that you guys couldn't capitalize off of because you don't understand economic policy. I'm supposed to be playing this video, ain't I? I'm sorry, y'all. Let me go ahead and play this video. I'm sorry.
She's supported by the tens of thousands and turned American dreams into nightmares. She supported these EV mandates that tax you, took your money, and sent it to electric vehicles that are made in China instead of made right here in the state of Michigan, destroying thousands of Michigan auto jobs in the process. Kamala Harris now is standing here in Michigan asking us for a promotion. I think it's time to say to Kamala Harris, no thank you, you are fired.
And that is Ohio Senator and Vice Presidential nominee J.D. Vance campaigning in Byron Center, Michigan yesterday. He's blaming VP Kamala Harris for sending auto jobs to China and to Mexico. Vance's comments come as Stellantis has plans to lay off nearly 2,500 workers at the Warren Truck Assembly plant in Michigan that's currently builds an older version of the Ram 1500 pickup truck.
And they have no new investment. Zero new investment, and I warned y'all that this was about to happen. I warned y'all that this was about to come. They are going to start laying off people at a mass rate. I almost don't even want Trump to even win this election. And it's not because I don't think that he would be best for the economy. I don't think that y'all would appreciate him. I don't think that y'all would appreciate him. I think that we need to suffer. I'm going to get into that shortly.
Joining me now is Michigan Congressman John James, member of the House Foreign Affairs and Energy and Commerce Committees. He's also an Iraq War veteran. Congressman, it's always a pleasure to talk with you, and thank you.
You keep saying I thought that Buick was American in hell. Buick is American. It's owned by General Motors, but it's largely made for the Chinese market. And so the majority of the parts and the majority of Buick itself is manufactured and shipped over here to sell in the American market, but is largely supporting Chinese jobs. It's supporting jobs that's not here in the United States of America. It's sold here to you as a consumer, but is made for the Chinese market. And so, yes, it is a GM product, but it's ultimately sold to you that's being manufactured overseas. It's not being built over here in the United States of America.
Again for your service to our great country. I want to get your take on what's going on in Michigan here, because you've got a real change of sentiment. Whereas we used to see all the auto jobs churning about in Michigan, it's totally changed now. You've got so much production happening in China because of the electric vehicle push. What are your constituents saying about this?
Very, very concerned. But look about this, Maria. Michigan is the election center of the universe in 2024 because we are an economic bellwether for the rest of the country. When you start seeing layoffs in Michigan, you better be concerned around the rest of the country, because recessions come to Michigan first, they last the longest, and they hit us hardest because the economic policies of these Democrat extremists are pushing our jobs not just to other states, but to other countries. We've seen this movie before. We saw it in the recessions in the 80s. We saw it with NAFTA in the 90s. We saw it with the recession in the early 2008. And we're seeing it again now. These types of things, that losing 2,500 jobs in Warren, jobs that we should be doing here.
Not a manufacturer's choice. See, this is how ignorant some of us are. It's not a manufacturer's choice. It's not, because in order for them to compete against other manufacturers that's making parts over in the other parts of the world, you can't compete. If it costs you 4 times to make the part here in the United States of America because legislation allows for your competitor to go over to China to make it over there because they've incentivized them to be able to do so, then you have to do the same thing. Otherwise, either your company is going to go out of business or you're going to get swallowed up. So your legislative policies absolutely play a role in what your competitors do, which is one of the reasons why China forced American companies to partner with them in order to do business in their country. It's not as simple as to say, oh, no, that's just a manufacturer's choice. It's not. Because people don't want to pay 2 and 3 times the vehicle price just to say it's made here in America. The only thing that they care about is they thoughtless. They don't care about American jobs. They care about what's going to affect them right now. So the role of the government is to protect the American economy by incentivizing and preventing unfair practices in that way. And so you can't let other countries, you can't give it away and let other countries then say, and we know why they gave it away. We know what the incentive is. You can't give it away and then let other countries completely control what goes on here in the United States of America through bad legislation. I don't know why y'all don't understand that. Y'all, honestly, y'all gotta go and research and do your history on what these policies are. I know that's too much to ask. I ain't even gonna say all of that. Let's just go. Let's rock.
These are the types of things that happen when the Biden comply or die is force automakers into survival mode. And that's the kind of thing that not just hurts the auto workers, right? Most of them who will be laid off will be junior auto workers, the younger folks for whom Santa Claus will be visiting right before Christmas. Yeah. It's going to be hurting suppliers. It's going to be hurting the bar and grill directly across the street, and they're going to have to lay off workers. This has a massive impact on Michigan's entire economy, and Kamala Harris is responsible for it.
Well, I think this is a really good point that you're making, because within Michigan and certain communities, the auto sector drives a lot of the activity. So it's got lots of legs in different industries because they're all basically surviving on the strength of the auto sector. So it has a big impact. Liz Peek, jump in here, because this is a serious economic issue, and we're seeing those cracks in the auto sector first in Michigan, Liz.
Well, yeah, the government has made it almost impossible for these companies to move forward because of the EV mandates and all the other problems. But, Congressman, I want to ask you about the relationship between the United Auto Workers leadership and their membership. It seems to me Donald Trump did pretty well with UAW workers in 2016, probably not quite so well in 2020. Shawn Fain just came out and basically sued Elon Musk and Donald Trump on pretty ridiculous charges that they were talking up firing strikers and stuff. How do you read this tension? I mean, is this are we going to see the auto workers turn out for Donald Trump in this election or not?
Well, first, good morning, Liz. Great to see you again.
Nice to see you, too.
Yeah, and second, Shawn Fain is trying to save his own skin. As part of the legacy of UAW leadership among many most recent presidents who have been popped for corruption, Shawn Fain has had a very bad past few months with those probes coming in from D.C. of all places, looking at allegations of corruption, but also losing in Alabama, and now this, where losing jobs potentially to Mexico with the layoffs in Warren and overflow work going to Saltillo. Shawn Fain is looking for anything. He's grasping at straws because he recognizes that his own union population isn't aligned with him. Shawn Fain has sold his auto workers out for environmental extremists and the Biden agenda. This is something that does not work for auto workers, and auto workers know it. Auto workers recognize not just that their jobs are going to other states and other countries, but they're less able to take care of their families long term. And the younger auto workers, the one who just got started, those are the ones who are going to be hit hardest by the layoffs, the ones who have young families. They know that Shawn Fain's leadership is not working for them, and Shawn Fain is pointing the blame anywhere else he possibly can.
And that's a fact. And I think that, and it's funny because I believe that I got word and I needed to do a little bit more research on that, but I'm going to be paying attention to the Democratic National Convention all week. And so I'll be, covering that on this channel, obviously, and on the Anton Daniels channel. But Shawn Fain already sold y'all out. I told y'all that he sold y'all out. And so I told y'all to make sure that y'all get everything that y'all can right now, because some of y'all, a lot of y'all are going to suffer as a result of how it is that he aligned himself with this Biden-Harris administration and these policies that's ultimately going to continue to send y'all jobs overseas. And he villainized everybody except for himself. And now he's also involved in a probe based off of corruption, and it's just going to continue to go downhill from there. So hopefully y'all get a little bit of insight from that. And I educated y'all on what to look for when it comes to having these conversations on why tariffs, North American Free Trade Agreement, jobs, economic policy, it all plays a part in your success.